Um, Certainly things like platinum, which requires an enormous amount of heat to make, is rare, and titanium and these sorts of minerals and can have only been supposedly recently discovered, but platinum, for instance, was brought up out of the seabed around 1,000 miles north of New Guinea and 1,500 miles south of Japan. There's a place there which is called Nandol in the Pacific, which has enormous, beautiful, pristine granite, basalt rock, which is very magnetic. And there's more rock in the sea there than there is in the whole wall of China. And it can be shown, of course, that this is an area which is the electromagnetic eye of the Earth, and all storms come out of that eye. And there's some beautiful terraced mountains which still exist in the Philippines there, which has all been carved by one hand from start to finish, which it kind of had to have taken quite some time to have created, and it would be difficult for us to even create it today and take some time for us to create it. But if we just grew food in that breadbasket, that breadbasket is large enough and so in a climactic zone that it could feed quite a bit of the food of produce and things that the world of all the population has, that the Earth has today. It could be fed, and all of the northern part of New Guinea, that you could see the terrain denuded, is all terraced. And so this all harks back to a time of antiquity, certainly long before the seas rose and covered this area over. But Nandol can be looked upon by someone who has a deep insight into this as a place where electromagnetic energy was discharged and caused the water and rain that was held in the clouds to become dumped on these terraces. And you could say that it was a form of weather control, the Nandol, all these stone structures that exist there. And it was in this region that the Japanese were able to, long before platinum really became known more, they were able to bring up platinum artifacts and things, which they used that platinum in various war machinery and that sort of thing at the time, you know. So if we reverse engineer the seas, the ocean, the Pacific Ocean, if we look at, it's slowly becoming more and more salty, but if you reverse engineer the amount of salt that it has in it, it only goes back to being around 75 million years old. And certainly the ancient ones talk about there being 5 suns, and we're in our 5th sun, which is called the sun of earthquakes, and that the sun before this was called a watery sun. And when that meteorite hit the Yucatan, it pushed the western side of the continent up 10,000 feet, and it sunk the eastern seaboard of South America below 2,000 feet or more below sea level. And you can see, which I've been flown below the cloud cover underneath the clouds to observe the deforestation and things for various groups that I've worked with in the past, and I've done some reconnaissance of mahogany and things like that, and teaching people about reconnaissance for illegal mahogany and tree cutting and things like that in the Amazon. But as a result of flying over the whole of the continent, I had the opportunity to be able to observe, to see how the rivers like the Amazon used to flow out all the way out to the shelf, the continental shelf that exists and that's really very deep underwater today, but at one point it actually flowed, and that was the original coastline. And then little hippos and camels and things all of a sudden found themselves up around about 10,000 feet. And people can have, and paleontologists and others have wondered how could it be that things kind of existed up that high and that all of a sudden they just became extinct. But they all died in a very short, very short period of time because of the extreme cold. They were all temperate creatures that all of a sudden found themselves up around 10,000 feet. And when that meteorite impacted, in the natives still to this day talk about having seen all of the water in the rivers and that become vaporized around where the impact was, and the heat and things of that, which the meteorite that went into the Yucatan, it was about the size of the island of Manhattan, about 8 miles, 7.5 to 8 miles long by a couple miles wide, and that hit and buried itself very deep into the earth, which we're still having the reverberations of that. Some 65 million years ago when that occurred, it vaporized an enormous amount of water which went up into the heavens and hung in the heavens for some time, and so we never had really any light much, nor did we have dark. It was just a soft diffuse light, and we had a very thick soupy type of atmosphere, and giganticism was during this time, and we've got dragonflies that were sort of around 21, 24 feet in diameter, and across their wingspan, huge. And of course we have evidence of humans being very tall during this period of time as well, but that there was no clouds, there was no rainbows, we couldn't see the sun, and it was just a soft diffuse light, and there were no real seasons, and so it was a time of giganticism with plants, because ultraviolet light and radioactiveness, radiation from the heavens was impeded, and during this period of time things grew really huge, and there was an enormous amount more oxygen in the atmosphere and carbon dioxide during this period of time. But then all this changed around 10,000 years ago, because all of a sudden you could say that all this water started to condense and precipitate, and started to rain, and it rained and rained for a long time. The Sphinx, of course, has watermarks on it, which shows that it can have taken thousands and thousands of years of water to have created the wear marks that exist on the Sphinx. And texts in India talk about the Sphinx as a message for people on the earth today, and that at the time was built, and it was pointing up into the heavens, and it was all to do with a watching of the heavens, but that something of such a nature could occur again. And things have never been really static, certainly, as Darwin and Hegel thought, and